Howdy, everyone, and welcome to Wild Weiss, the community podcast for Calgary Weiss Schwarz. I'm today's host, Igor Squatslov. You know, back when we ran the first episode of Wild Weiss 2 years ago, we did two things. First, we started with an interview of a local player who had just won a very large tournament, and I promised local Calgary Weiss Schwarz content. Today's guest lets me fill both those goals quite nicely. And if you're worried that this is me bookending the podcast and riding off into the sunset, worry not, my friends. I still have a lot more to say about our favorite cringe weeb card game. Without further ado, let's welcome in a player who just took third place in the Bushiroad Championship Series event in Canada's second city, Toronto, Ontario. He's been on the show many times before, but first time as a guest. Welcome, Platplat, to Wild Weiss. How y'all doing?
Hello, I'm doing quite well today, thank you.
Looking forward to any new sets coming out, or how's that all going?
I am interested in Avatar: The Last Airbender. If they do it right, I think it could be a very strong but also flavorful set. Maybe based on colors or something to represent the elements, who knows. I'm also quite interested in the second set for Seven Deadly Sins. I think there's a lot of potential there for a very strong deck.
They just need a finisher, right?
They have finishers, but they kind of just need some glue. They did that thing where they split a lot of the nice utility into two different traits, so they kind of just need a little bit of everything for both sets. But I think it would be cool to see something good come out of that, so that the English original sets finally have a really strong standalone set.
It's tough because Adventure Time, it was a good set.
I agree.
And Attack on Titan set final is probably pretty good on its own, too.
Yeah, most of the cards that you're playing are actually just from the final set, except for, the Armin Runner, which, you can't really replace that, and then also into 3-2 Armin, which, again, you can't really replace that. But the blue deck, I think, is mostly by itself, but you can also just totally get away with making something from its own set.
No, that's good to hear. On the Japanese side, though, man, Pixar is shaping up to be a very fun set.
Yeah, Pixar is... I'm reading cards, and I'm like, these aren't real cards. Come on, Bushiroad, quit pulling my leg,
Hey, I really want to live in a world where you're done roughhousing your opponent with Buzz and Woody, and then your opponent thinks they're done, and you're like, we've got the old man from Up coming to slap you upside the head.
Oh my god. I can't even get away with those in the same deck. Everything is costed so prohibitively.
That's true. But it's just I want to dream of this very funny situation.
I like the set, but oh no, I'm hesitant to pick it up because I could only play it at locals, at least currently.
Right. All right, that's enough of that. So let's get on with the interview. How did you initially get into Weiss Schwarz, and what got you hooked?
So the first time I encountered the game, I was at a convention that was honestly terrible. Miserable experience. Because the people running the convention kind of just were like, oh, we have money. We can just make something happen. So it was up in Edmonton, and they had rented out 3 halls of the expo center. And maybe if you put all 3 of those halls together, it would have partially filled up one of them.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. The event was supposed to actually be 3 days, and it ended on the second day, rather. It was just bad, but it did get me into Weiss Schwarz, so that's a positive. What happened was I went to do something, and when I came back, my friends were sitting down with this card game that I'd never heard of. I'm like, oh, what are you playing? And they're like, oh, well, we went to the vendor hall, and we saw these anime that we like, and it turns out there's a card game for it. So my one friend was playing Vocaloid, Hatsune Miku, and the other friend was playing, I think it was Kantai Collection. And I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. Let me go see what they have. Show me to the booth. And then they did. And I was like, oh, yo, there's Nisekoi. I like that show right now. And so I picked up a trial deck, and here I am, 7 years later. And funny enough, the convention was actually on Thanksgiving weekend, which is exactly the weekend that we're recording this on.
All right, so it's an important anniversary for you, too. And also, funnily enough, you still bring out that Nisekoi deck at locals, so maybe it never left.
Well, that was English Nisekoi, but I still do enjoy playing Nisekoi. I think it's a fun set, and it's got a lot of memories for me.
Fair enough, fair enough. Let's talk Toronto Bushiroad Championship Series. What did you think of the state of the English Weiss Schwarz metagame going in? What decks were most prominent?
I think, or rather, I thought going in that it's pretty healthy. It's quite open, but Quintessential Quintuplet set 2 just came out, so that was going to be a big thing to worry about. Other than that, though, I'd say it's just been mostly the same of what we've seen this last year. Although, like, Tokyo Revengers got really popular all of a sudden, so that was something to consider.
What's your opinion of the TRV deck? Do you think that sort of deck existing is good for the metagame, or is it kind of warping things in a weird way? To just give players context of what I'm talking about, the Tokyo Revengers deck is a deck that just attacks on 2 lanes and then dumps an obscene finisher when it gets to level 3 that can probably kill from early level 2 and sometimes even late level 1.
I think that it is something different, which is cool to see, because we've had dual lane decks before in Sword Art Gun Gale Online, and then there was also dual laners in Fate, but they didn't see any play, and the Gun Gale Online deck certainly wasn't popular either. It was just interesting. So I think it is cool that we're seeing a new, like, almost an entirely new deck archetype showing up. I think that's cool. I think that the deck itself has potential to be unhealthy for the game. I think currently as it is, it's fine. If there's ever a second set, which I feel exceedingly low chances of ever happening, then maybe it could be like just too much overall. But right now, I think it's fine how it exists. I think it's quite cool and was a very interesting deck building activity. I think it's built very different from how you would construct other decks.
It's just built different.
It literally is built different, yeah. I think overall, though, the deck is fine to go as it is. It punishes new players way more than it punishes experienced players. I think the problems that it's presenting to a new player are not going to be obvious how you find the solutions. But once you actually have experience playing against the deck, I think there's enough things that you can do to mitigate what they're trying to accomplish that you can get and win easier than if you hadn't played it against it at all.
Right. Like, as long as your deck has a way to punish them with stock washes, tap down the key cards, keep hand by not attacking, or even just siding at key opportunities, you can manage them pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, with the nature of them only attacking twice, your third lane is never going to die. So you kind of get a pseudo +1 on board because that character's never dying.
So what you're saying is it dies another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the next turn, but, you know. Yeah, I think there's enough things that you, the player, can do to deal with it. Dean from Burn 1 has a really good video about it that I'd recommend checking out. I don't necessarily agree with everything, but the majority of ideas that he presents there are definitely worth considering.
Makes sense. All right, so what deck did you end up playing? And how did the meta landscape influence that deck pick?
Well, the deck I played was Hololive with the Corone level 1 3 finisher. The meta didn't really have much of a decision, or an impact rather, on my deck at all. I kind of looked at what I had available to me and went, well, nobody in our locals has quints that I can borrow currently, as far as I know. And then I looked at Fate and I was like, well, if I want to play that, I don't think that plays into the Kanto Marine Hololive deck very well, because it just gets rid of things by putting them to clock rather than anywhere else. So there were some changes that I really wanted to make because I think that the deck is still quite strong. I just didn't have the time to dedicate testing or actually go and get the cards from people.
Right.
So that kind of ruled that out. And I was like, well, if I'm going to play that, I may as well play something else instead. And then I had grabbed a bunch of stuff for Attack on Titan Final Season. I've had the deck previously. I was really keen on playing it, but the problem was I had less than a week to try and build something. And I'm okay at deck construction, but I didn't trust myself to get something that I really felt confident on in a week.
Yeah.
So I just kind of landed on something that I was really familiar with because I figured that's probably the safest thing is do something that you've done a lot already. So I played the deck that I locked in.
Right. What key changes did you make to Rushia to really convene it to a metagame that has two very powerful standby decks in Mushoku Tensei and Quintessential Quintuplets, as well as a pretty overbearing deck that likes to Ricky a lot in Kanta Marine?
Funny enough, the only change I made to the deck before I submitted it was taking out a foil so I could put in a non-foil.
Really?
Other than that, it's the same 50 that I've been playing for quite a while now, but my deck was already prepared for English, so that's kind of unfair to say, but I really didn't make any changes. But what I've been playing to deal with English was a few cards that I'd rather discuss later when we go over the deck, but
Right. So one of the common knocks of the Rushia builds is that new players are punished harder by the deck than more experienced players. Would you agree?
yeah, I'd agree. I think that if you're not familiar with what the card does, you're just going to do the same thing that you do against every other deck. If you know what the card's going to do, you're going to sit there and try to empty out your deck all the way so that you're sitting on a fat deck, rather than just leaving yourself very thin, which is probably better sitting on a thin deck with well-compressed climaxes in there. But against Rushia, it's generally going to be better just to have a big deck with some climaxes, just due to the nature of the shuffle back being more punishing against thin decks.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. All right, so what do you do to prepare for this tournament? What do you think helped the most?
Well, again, I had played this deck quite a few times. Not so much leading up to, or the week leading up to. I actually didn't get that much practice in altogether, but we had a good session the night before we left. Though I've played this deck just a lot since it came out into English, so I've been very familiar with the lines of my deck, and I think that's really important. So compared to when we went down to Houston, say, I did a lot less actual game preparation.
Right.
But I think if you're going to a tournament, you should be practicing your deck a lot, making sure you know everything about it, because you don't want to waste any time in the round thinking about what you can do, and more so just knowing what you can do and then thinking how you perform that.
Right. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, the other thing that I did to prepare was just looking at the decks that were popular at the time and knowing what they have available to them. I wasn't super familiar with Quints, so I did have to read up on that, but I mean, it's just an 8 standby deck that does what it does, so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's efficient, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know, it isn't really looking to do the same thing as Data Live was when that was allowed, but still very strong.
Right. All right, so let's move on to the tournament itself. Tell us about your Swiss rounds. What did your path look like?
All right, so starting at the first round, I played against Tokyo Revengers, the dual laner deck. Same thing that we mentioned previously. The game was fine. I could tell that my opponent didn't know every single line, but to their credit, it's a really hard deck to play without learning from somebody what you're supposed to be doing. So he played it quite well overall, I'd say. As you'd expect, really, I was just able to execute my game plan without opposition because they don't really present answers to your threats. They just are looking to get to their end game.
Right. So you basically just got to keep a nice Rushia board.
Yeah, they don't contest your deck until level 3, and that's when they're looking to kill you.
Right. So did you get to use your tap counter against them?
Yeah, I was getting there. So since they didn't compete with me at all, I was able to sculpt perfectly for my rest counter. And going into his combo turn, he looked at my clock and saw that I had a rest counter in there, and just decided, oh, I'm safe. And then swung once, and I tapped down his climax combo, level 3. And he went, oh, you're playing 2. And I go, yep, this is why you play 2. So, yeah, play 2 rest counters. They're good.
Yeah. And that must have been very sad for him, because that was probably the game right there.
Yeah, no, that was it for him, because he had only had small swing and then the second one. And I was, honestly, I think I was sitting at maybe late level 2, if that. It was a pretty unfortunate game for him.
Fair enough.
Yeah, going into my second round, so I played against Quince, 8 standby. This was the first time I've ever actually played against the deck. I don't know how I've managed to dodge it when it's existed in Japanese for at least a year now, I think.
Kevin started playing Lost Ark. That's your answer.
That's probably my answer, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know what happened, really, but I was also easily answering their board that game. I think part of it definitely was due to the key tech card that I was playing at level 0. It's level 0 Shion. What it does is when it comes into play, you reveal your top card. If it's a level 1 or higher character, you select a level 1 or lower character in their front row and give it one its own level. And then the card itself is also a level 0 bomb deck bomb.
That's so disgusting.
Yeah, it's a really, really strong card. I think if you have any business playing blue in your Hololive deck, you should be playing 4 right now. Even if the top check doesn't get the desired result, knowing what's on top of your card is really, or knowing what's on top of your deck is really, really important right now. Lets you check if you want to brainstorm, checks for your Watame level 3, checks for your super level 3 burns. Also, just a couple times in the tournament, I started as the first player, played it down because I had nothing else, and top checked a climax, so I just moved it to my back row and passed. Worked out favorable for me. That happened in 2 games.
Yeah, and that's actually a strong play.
Yeah, I think it's very worth giving up 1 stock early to cancel one of their attacks.
Well, it also means that you don't have a climax buried there for most of the game that you have to, or you aggressively have to dig out.
Yeah, I think this list that I was playing can dig that out pretty easily starting early, because I'm playing a combination of 5 drop searches and salvages,
Right.
as well as just having the brainstormer. I mean, I don't like brainstorming early on the first deck, but brainstorm 5 will see a climax slightly more often. But I don't think that's so much the issue for this deck specifically. I just think it's a lot stronger to just know that you have a cancel and just deal with that.
Yeah, fair enough.
But going back to the match, I think that Shion level 0 helped me answer their board more than a couple times. They have a 1/1 that can't be reversed by cost zeros. So that kind of shuts down my level 1 combo because it gives a character on reverse search. So that helps. It also can sometimes remove their 1/1s that have the hand encore, which for most standby decks, that's what you do, is just convert your level 0 utility into this 1/1 and keep on it for a few turns at least. So removing their board that way very aggressively is good. It also adds a point of damage back into their deck, which can be relevant. But yeah, I was able to answer the board pretty well. Then I came down to the end of the game. I lived through their combo turn. I think I ended up rest countering them. I can't quite remember, but basically it was on my last attack. I was supposed to do 4 damage, and my crit revealed 5, and then they canceled on the 5th card. So yeah, that was a bit of a heartbreaker. But I mean, after the game, I was debating if I really should have just played over it, because I didn't really give my last turn much thought, which is definitely just don't do that. Think about stuff when you have time to do it.
No.
But no, I kind of just went, no, we're going to just turn card sideways and I'll get us there. But I debated if I should have been playing over it, but they were sitting at like 3-0 or low 3 maybe. So I think it was probably just fine to leave out 3 level 3s. Like it was just crit trigger. I don't know.
Yeah. There's not much you could have done about
No, not
It's
really.
not like you could have checked it out, right?
No, not for the third attack, but I mean, needless to say, that was a loss on the second round. So it's kind of on edge because I was like, oh, now I have to win it out because I did know that we had some players there with buy cards and 2 buy cards actually. So I was like, losing in the second round's really bad for me.
You definitely did luck out because like some players with buy cards, if I understood correctly, were paired against each other in the third round. So that was kind of funny.
Yeah, at some point in the tournament, players that had buy cards managed to get paired against each other. So that freed the tournament up for a lot of players who were even sitting at X2 at the time. They had an even greater shot of getting in. So that was very lucky to see.
Yeah, we like that because I'm not gonna lie, I don't like the buy card system as it's currently implemented.
I think it's neat, but I think it should be limited to 1 per tournament, not 2. If you have 2 buy cards that you redeem in a tournament, as long as your second loss is somewhere in the later rounds of the event, you're pretty much guaranteed to get in as long as you stay at X2. So I don't think that's very healthy. I think Bushiroad should really either look at getting rid of the buy card system or just limiting it to 1, because I don't think that's healthy.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
Unfairly rewards players who have access to traveling to more shop challenges. And for example, for us, our first shop challenge didn't even happen until Toronto. So neither of us even had access to going to get a buy card.
Yeah, actually, I think the first shop challenge occurred when we were playing the BCS.
Yes, it was happening the exact same day.
Yeah.
So just it's frustrating, but I mean, it makes sense that you'd reward busier or higher traffic areas with more buy cards, but I just don't think you should be able to redeem 2 in the same tournament.
Oh, no, that's for sure. Let's move on to game 3 then.
Sure. So game 3 was against Ruby. They were playing comeback standby. I honestly, I've looked at Ruby and then I like purged all knowledge of the set from my brain. So I was worried, but also quite happy to play this guy early because it ended up that a lot of the cards that I saw there were very helpful because I ran into it a couple more times in the tournament. Not spoilers, but it gave me some good and also unhealthy ideas of what the set had because there were just some cards that he wasn't playing that I didn't know to look out for. But the match, he seemed kind of so like obviously coming off of a win, it wasn't like best attitude, which is on me. I don't think I should be presenting myself poorly like that, but I was unfamiliar with his cards, so I was just reading it because I had a hard time actually hearing my opponent. So they just play a card and then start doing something, and I'm like, whoa, like let me read the card because what you're doing doesn't really make sense to me right now.
Right.
Or some effects just didn't seem right, but they were. So I had to like pick up and read cards, and he didn't seem very happy with that. But I mean, I don't know. Speak up, I guess.
Well, I ran into an opponent like that in a later round as well. And I think the other impediment was tournaments in Canada still have the mask mandates. And if you're someone who's naturally laconic and you're wearing a mask and you're under stress, you're probably going to mumble more. And you cannot hear that through a piece of cloth.
No, he just needed to speak up a little, but also my hearing isn't the greatest, so a lot of factors there. But I had to read cards, and he didn't seem happy about that. But turns out they've got some really good cards in that deck. Like I'm impressed. I think it's a set that you should really look out for and familiarize yourself with, because it just kind of has a bit of everything that you want in a tournament set right now. So I think that was represented in the results. I believe there was the second place of the tournament was actually Ruby. So I think that speaks a lot about the quality of the set. I really think it's slept on right now.
It's a very weird set because it's like it does a lot of things very well, but it doesn't do anything in a flashy way. Like its top end is Megamine.
Yeah, which I think is fine right now. But
Oh yeah, it's great.
well, it unless the card is worded different than Megumin, it does get around hexproof, which is going to be pretty relevant with Attack on Titan being popular again. So I think it is a very good set. For those unfamiliar, the top end burns 3 and then puts the card that's across from. So I think that's perfectly fine. I think overall the set has good tools. But yeah, I won the match. I was able to answer their board. Their standbys, since they're only playing 4 of them, are kind of they'll get something big in, but then they don't have anything to really like support that big thing. But they also have to play the standby because that's what their good finisher is on.
Do they not have like a nice back row support that they can just throw in a la Kimono Friends?
At level 2, not so much. At level 3, they have a decent one that lets you rearrange your top 2, but also gives 2k support. But at level 2, not as much.
Right.
Then going into match 4, I played against Quince again. I standby. I honestly don't remember much about this one, other than I wasn't too worried about it, because based on the second round, I was like, oh, I can deal with this deck not too bad, honestly. I think I've tooled the deck in such a way that it deals with it quite well. And then, yeah, they didn't really do a whole lot. I think the problem for a lot of players is the set had just come out pretty well. I think this might have been the first regional with it legal.
Right. So they didn't know their lines.
If you're not super familiar with the deck, it's a hard one to play. Yeah.
Yeah, because I found like so I was playing Hololive as well as this tournament, and my first 2 rounds were against Quince players, and I was never terribly impressed because they kept walking into walking into anti-change counters, which just wrecked their field.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I knew what to prepare for. I think it was probably I had more knowledge of the matchup than they did. So that definitely would help. So I won that match, and then going into round 5, I played against Mishoku 8 standby. This is a series you're probably going to see a lot less of in the upcoming tournaments with the restriction. If you do see it, you're probably going to see variants that aren't 8 standby, maybe the 8 bar or choice gate variants, just stuff that isn't 8 standby, because the restriction makes it less desirable to play over playing quintessentials 8 standby.
Yeah.
So for this match, I don't know, it was pretty even, and then around my level 2, they had refreshed. So I was looking at their waiting room, and they didn't have a whole lot in there, which was good. For example, they didn't have a second copy of the 2/2 in there, and I didn't even see like a 1/1 oversize or anything. So that's looking quite good. So I'm one of the cards that I'm running that helps with these matchups that I had played in the previous standby matchups as well. Is the level 3 Ayami. Basically, she's an early play that cares about having blue and yellow in your level. You need blue and yellow in your level, and then a red card in your clock somewhere to actually play her. She gives 1,500 to all your other characters, so not herself. But when she comes in via your hand, what she does is you choose one of the opponent's characters, and then they select a level X or lower in their waiting room, where X is -1 of that level, and you do that effect twice. So going into that turn, since they had such a small waiting room, I selected the level 3 that they just standbyed in, made them change it into something else, and then selected the level 2. So by doing it that way, they don't get to have the level 2 back on. And it was just really lucky for me that they didn't really have any quality targets in their waiting room. So that card just pulled its weight really hard, and I think that kind of managed to get me there on that. Not that it was bad per se, but it was definitely even up to that point, so I think that really swung it in my favor.
Right.
Yeah. Going into my level 3 turn, they actually have the Paul on field that when it cancels, or when damage you deal to it in that combat is canceled, they mill a card, and if that card has a soul trigger icon, it burns you back for that amount. I was quite lucky that my burn or my attack in that lane didn't get canceled, because I was actually swinging for 3 and sitting at 3-4, so that would have been lethal for me. So I got very lucky that he just took the damage in that slot, and then swung the third attack and won. So yeah, a little bit of luck, but also just that tech card really pulled its weight in that matchup.
Well, that's what you need it to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the majority of your matches that aren't against standby, it's going to be a pretty inconsequential card. But for your standby matches, it definitely makes it much better.
Right. For your not standby matches, you're probably playing Watame.
Yeah, you would rather play the Watame out at level 2. What it does is when it comes in, you top check reveal your top card. If it's a character, you select one of their level 3s or lower in the front row and just send it to the bottom of their deck. So in your non-standby matches, but also your standby matches, you are looking to play that card. It's just the Ayami has the chance of pulling more weight in standby matches. But, I mean, if they're playing Hololive or something like that, where they actually do play back rows that they care about that are costed, you are just effectively making them lose a stock investment. So sometimes you also level down early plays, but for the most part, it's going to be useful in standby.
Yeah, perfect.
Going into round 6, I played against Attack on Titan. They were playing 8 Gate, so the blue deck. This was actually Ryan Witterly from Strictly Broken TCG. It was real fun to play against him, but unfortunately for him, he just had a real bad game. He did not cancel the majority of my attacks. Actually, the first one the game was done was, did I cancel a single attack? And I had to say, honestly, I don't recall if you did, because it was just not good for him.
So it's just grimy.
Yeah, I felt like, I felt bad, because it's like, I would rather play like a good game against you.
Win's win.
I mean, it's 6 rounds into the tournament, and I'm already on 1 loss. You're going to have to take that. Yeah, absolutely won't complain about that. So, won that match. Going into round 7, I played against Ruby again. They were playing Comeback Standby. Basically, the same deck as the previous guy had been playing. So, this was the last round before Top Cut.
Yep.
So, I needed to win this one, but there was also still a chance that I get in if I lost this one. So,
yeah.
A little bit more comfortable, but I'm looking much better if I win the match. So, I'd firstly like to give a big congratulations to this player. He said it was actually his first regionals that he'd ever been to. So that's a really good record getting that far into the tournament, because we were still sitting pretty high at the top tables. So that's very impressive, I'd say.
Yeah, for a first event, that's very, very good.
Yeah, like I think he also demonstrated in our match that he's very competent at the game, and I think that he will have great success in the future if he continues at it.
Well, that's good to hear.
His deck was also very interesting compared to the previous guy's deck. So his was built a little different. He said himself, like, oh, I've got some weird cards because, like, I'm still pretty new and I don't have everything yet. So some of the things that he was playing that the other guy wasn't playing, that I had forgotten that they have, was actually an anti-change counter at level 2. So I think I did walk into that at one point because I just didn't know they had that. And then he was also playing the Maidens event, which is, I believe, 2/3 if they have a full board. Select the battle opponent, and they just don't deal damage for the turn, and then it also pumps some power. So he sprung that out actually pretty early in level 2, but his standbys were pulling a lot more weight for him because he actually had the stock to do it.
Right.
That actually had me so scared. The match was very close, actually. The turn that I thought I was going to kill on, he managed to cancel a very critical one and then swung back at me, and I was just absolutely scared that I wasn't going to win, or that I was going to die on that turn, but I also ended up getting some good cancels on him and then just cracked back for the win.
Actually, it's really funny that you mentioned that some X2s got hope to get in, because there was some drama at the X1 table.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a double loss.
Yeah, and it was at a table number that was actually higher than mine. I think it was at the top table slot.
Oh, wow.
went double loss, so that just blew the tournament record open for a lot of players that were sitting at X2.
Yeah, because I know I was X2 going into last round, and then I just had a catastrophically bad game. But a bunch of the players that we were with, they were still in it at X2, and then all of a sudden you just hear that, and we're just like, who gets in?
Yeah, no, it was. I knew I was getting in for sure at that point then, but then I was also like looking down the table, and like Jason from Strictly Broken was there. I was like, oh, he might get in now because I think he actually lost his last match, but like with that record, he might still get in. You never know.
Probably one of the more dramatic tournaments I've been in, but I've found like every major tournament I've been in has had some sort of weird drama like that.
Yeah, I think Bushiroad has a way of making the tournaments interesting, let's say.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of wish I did live reporting from the venue. That would have been fun.
That would have been fun.
I might do that for an upcoming tournament. Could be fun.
Could be fun. But yeah, after that there was the top cut deck check, and that took forever because they only had 2 judges to do it.
Somebody failed.
Yeah, so a player sat down and then he was like, he was playing Kaguya, which was very interesting because that was going to add even more diversity into the top cut, which there was already a large amount of actually. So he sat down and then he pulled up his deck list that he had submitted and he went, "Oh no!" And we just kind of look at him and we're like, "What's up, man?" Turns out I put in the wrong card for one of my cards. It's the same character. It's just a different card for that character.
Oh
like,
no!
Oh no! And he's like, yeah. Well, I made the deck list right before like registration was due because I wasn't actually sure if I was coming. And we're like, oh no! So he's like, yeah, I'd probably fail this deck check, right? And we're looking at him like, yeah, we're pretty sure you do. So when the judges finally got to him, they sat down and pulled up his stuff, and he's just like, hey, I'm just going to let you know right now. This card in my deck list isn't in my deck. It's supposed to be this other card that's the same character. And it was the head judge that was doing his deck check, and he goes, well, yeah, that's going to be a deck fail. I can't let you in on that. And the guy's like, yeah, fair enough. That's kind of what I figured. And the judge said, well, thanks for at least like letting me know ahead of time so we don't waste all this time doing it, you know?
Actually, yeah. I found the head judge was very good, at least in my experience, in dealing fairly with issues like that.
Yeah, I agree.
I definitely got a very fair handling of what could have been a game loss warning.
Yeah. I had a reasonable call as well that I made on myself, and it was basically the outcome that I expected. I just wanted to see if they would let me rewind a action.
So, player tip: report yourself. They like you being honest.
They do. That's a good tip from most card games. If you're the one catching your mistake, the judges are more willing to deal with you. As opposed to if your opponent just got you doing it and then you're like, oh wow, haha, whoops. Yeah. A little more convincing when it's coming from you, the player making the mistake. So
yeah,
call yourself. So yeah, after the deck check, I believe I actually asked you to go get me food because I was like, bro, I'm dying.
I scuffed it so bad. So a bunch of us went to Tim Hortons, and the wrap was not good. And I was like, wait, Alexandrios is just across the street.
You're right, but I specifically asked you for something not heavy, and so you're like, oh, not gyro. And I was like, yeah, probably not, man, because I find when I don't eat very much all day, and then I have something heavy, that goes very poorly. So I was like, I'd rather just something light.
That's true. But man, those gyros are good.
Yeah, so that was like half of the thing I was looking forward to when I was like, oh, I'm going to Toronto. I'll get to go to that gyro place that's right beside the venue again. And I got scammed. I was too busy doing well in the tournament, so I didn't get any of the gyro.
You know what? You could have probably just gotten gyro before you went to the airport.
You're right. I don't want to think about that now, though, because like I didn't think about it at the time.
That's what I did.
I'm aware. You sent me a picture taunting me because you're just so lovely.
Hey, I had a fantastic time in Toronto.
Oh, I know you did.
I don't think I went to bed before 2 a.m.
No, you really didn't.
Did that affect my play? Who's to say?
It certainly did in your first round. Since we registered back to back, we actually had the same sequential player numbers. So Tim was seated to my left at the start of the event, and he was just over there making some wild plays, and they had judge questions. And you were like looking at me to answer, and I just kept repeating, just call a judge if you're not sure, because I didn't want to say something that would get us both in trouble. And then you proceeded not to call the judge, because, oops. But yeah.
Well, it was more just like, I don't know why my brain was just like, you put the card in first. And my brain's like, no, that's not how this goes.
Yeah, you had 4 people around you telling you, no, you're thinking of the old refresh rules.
I think I definitely woke up midway through that game.
Yeah, you after that round were a lot more awake than prior to playing that round.
Hey, pro tip, Nuit Blanche is really fun.
There's going to be like 5 people that understand what that is.
Okay, it's an avant-garde art show in the middle of town that runs from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's awesome. Go do it. But yeah, looking at the sets that people actually played in Swiss, did it line up with your expectations? Any major surprises?
Yeah, I'd say it lined it up with my expectations. I was honestly surprised I didn't see something weirder in the first 2 rounds, because I find out a lot of these tournaments, just due to the nature of them, you usually see something just wild in the first couple of rounds. So honestly, seeing meta sets and decks for them all the way through to the end was a little surprising to me. Because in Houston, to be fair, we were playing a teams event, but I played against like Kaguya right after ban list, which, okay, I can see, but then I also played against like 8 choice data bullet, which I was like, I can see a little less. Like, I like the deck, but I was surprised that somebody brought that. So yeah, I find out a lot of these events early in the rounds, you'll find something just wild to play against, but that was the only thing that subverted my expectation, I'd say. Otherwise, they were all what I would expect people to be playing at a tournament currently.
Fair enough. Did you have a favorite and least favorite matchup in Swiss?
Did I have a favorite and least favorite matchup in Swiss? Weirdly enough, I didn't feel bad sitting down against Quint, because I think I was pretty well equipped to deal with it. So I was actually like kind of happy sitting down against that second player, especially. Because I really felt confident that I could get the run back on it.
Right.
Maybe Ruby, only because I didn't know much about it. Maybe that's like the only thing I was worried about. Tokyo Revengers, I was like slightly worried about for like 5 minutes. Not to be rude, but
be a little rude.
Okay, yeah, I guess there's no nice way to say that. Like, again, the players still played it very well. I've seen it played much worse, but there was just some things where I was like, all right, I think I'm good in this one. I know enough about how to play this matchup that I'm not worried.
Cool. All right, so let's talk top 8. Going in, did you like your chances?
No. Because as soon as it's top 8, it's a single elim, so I was very on edge, because I was like, if I'm like this far and I don't at least get like top 4, I'm going to be real disappointed,
Right.
So we were actually sitting there before our matches started, and I was talking to people, and they're like, yeah, like I want to, really excited, I want to like shoot for first or something. I'm like, man, I want to aim for like at minimum 4th.
You want to win one game.
Yeah, I was like, I want to get into at least 4th so that I get in the second picture, And they're like, you know what, third greedy, like at least 4th. Third would be preferred, because then I get an invite, but at least get me 4th. Get me on the second picture on the socials.
Were you surprised by anything that made top 8?
Kaguya originally, but then they failed their deck check. Other than that, I would say that the lists were exactly what you would expect. I'm actually going to pull it up real quickly because I'm super prepared and totally had that
Hell
ready.
yeah.
All right. So yeah, the sets that you'd expect to make top cut were there. I don't think there was any real big surprises, honestly. Kaguya, like I said, was the most interesting one, but they didn't get through deck check, unfortunately. So there was two Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon decks. They were both basically the same deck. Comeback Gate deck, which is very standard. So nothing really surprising there. There was two quintessential quintuplet 8 standby decks. So again, really what you'd be expecting to see. Two Attack on Titan decks. One 8 comeback and one that was comeback choice.
Ooh, spice.
The choice one I was a little more surprised to see, but I also believe they lost in the very first round of Top Cut, or rather, I know they did. So kudos to them getting there. I still think that's a very interesting choice. It's definitely not the favored pick currently. Other than that, there was myself on Hololive. I was the only Hololive deck in the top 8, which was a little surprising that there wasn't like a Kanata Marine deck, but I think overall in Swiss it was actually a pretty unpopular deck. Although I don't really have the stats to back that up or anything. I only heard a couple people talking about how they played against it, so I think maybe it's just falling off the favor, even though it's still pretty good.
Weird.
Probably the weirdest one to show up in top 8 was Ruby, playing 6 choice, 2 standby.
The spice.
Yeah, that's actually what a lot of people are on. The decks I played earlier where they were comeback standby are apparently more weird. Because the choice level 1 basically is the same as mine, where it gives a character on reverse salvage, but it can do it from the back row as well.
Right.
So they get away with kind of playing these like oversizes, kinda, and just like pumping power to one thing so that it gets 1 to 2 reverses or 1 to 2 searches. So it's got a very interesting game plan. I think it's pretty good. But that was probably about the weirdest thing. But even then, like, I still think it's a very good deck to play.
All right. So let's go on through your path through top 8.
So going into the top 8, my first match was against Attack on Titan 8 Comeback. And prior to sitting down, I was kind of like, why do I feel like I recognize this guy? But not entirely sure. Like, I kind of looked at him and I was like, why do you feel slightly familiar? So while we were sitting there shuffling up, he mentioned, yeah, while we were in Houston, I played against you. And I was like, oh, you're that guy. I played against you at a store tournament prior to the Team Trios event in Houston when the air conditioning went out. So that was a lovely tournament. Everyone was very sweaty, and I had played against
It was
him.
great. I loved it.
Yeah, it was all right. But yeah, I had played against him there, and funny enough, he was at the time playing Hololive Corone Rushia. So seeing him at this event and I was playing the deck that he was playing at that time, I thought was pretty funny. So I was like, oh, I know this guy. Like, I had beat him while we were in Houston. So I was like, I feel a little bit more comfortable because, like, I beat this guy once already. I think I can do it a second time, maybe. So that was a little nice, but, you know, still a very even match for both in top 8. Like, it's probably going to be really different. So he was playing the exact same list as Jason from Strictly Broken and Carmen from Burn 1 and BCS Weiss Schwarz were playing. They have a really good video you can go check out. I think an 8 comeback attack on Titan it will be a very strong deck going into the rest of this season. I think it's something to look into and familiarize yourself with because it's pretty good. So for both of us, honestly, it was pretty rough. We didn't really do much other than sit there like punching each other by turning sideways. It kind of went way worse for him though. Like he played down the 2-1 Armin changer and just never changed it into the level 3. So if that's any indication of how poorly that game went,
Yep.
there it is. So it went slightly better for me, so I came ahead with the win.
Nice. That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Attack on Titan?
I have many thoughts about Attack on Titan, but specifically about this deck, which I think is what you're asking me about. My opinion on the deck 8 comeback, I think it's very good. I think it might be the best build for the deck right now because it's uninteractive at both level 1 and mostly uninteractive at level 3. It kind of cheats because like it's at the end of attack it does its effect, but gives it untargetable. Like they can't really rest counter it or anything. Like the only thing they can do is memory kit counter it. But
Yeah.
you should be able to know what numbers they need to hit to do that. And you have a lot of manipulation of your powers in this deck. So I think it's really strong. I think the 8-gate deck, the blue one, could also be quite strong. It's got a very explosive finisher. I think it also has good tools at level 2 that deal with early plays. It can 2-for-1 sometimes. So that's pretty threatening. I think the new gold bar finisher is less impressive than I initially thought it was, because right now a lot of interactions running around. So clock kicking is probably not very good still, which has been the majority opinion for the last few years.
Right.
I was more interested in that top end than I was Sasha, but I think after hearing Carmen mention that when he was playing the deck, somebody just crashed all their lane into his and then passed the turn to him, and he goes, "Oh, I have nothing to clock kick," is probably a good summary of why that deck top end isn't as desirable currently. I think I'm underwhelmed by the choice finisher, although like mill bottom 4 burn for level X's, which includes characters, is certainly more desirable than just burning for climaxes. I don't know if only doing that is like really enough to make it more interesting than playing the comeback finisher, because like the Sasha level 3 for the comeback deck can like turn 1 copy into 3 depending on what's in your waiting room, because when you play it you salvage. So it pretty quickly goes from, oh, I have 1 in hand to now I have 3 on the board and I'm ready to triple combo.
And then you get your heals in with your combo resurrecting a different character.
Yeah, because to do triple, you only need either 1 stock going into attack or a confirmed reverse with the stock charge back row going into your attack. So it's pretty simple to triple, honestly. You just have to keep your hand up. But if you're playing the deck correctly, you shouldn't be losing your hand that much. So I think that's probably the strongest one to look at.
Neat.
Personally, I think the level 1 Aaron might be more interesting. The old one, I mean, on Wind.
Yeah. Then Mikasa.
Yeah, Mikasa's really strong, but uninteractive, which is very desirable right now. I think if Standby becomes less popular, then Aaron will be very good, because I do like the new movement gears. They feel a lot better to play than they read, but I think the old combo might be more desirable with the bounce back. But right now it's tough to do so when Standby is running around. So
makes sense.
If there's a meta post Standby, then I think Aaron would be more desirable. But right now, I think for Attack on Titan, 8 comeback is probably the deck to be playing.
Alrighty, let's go to your top 4 match.
Sure. So for my 9th round, the top 4 match, this was the Ruby 6-choice 2 standby deck. I lost this match, so I'll preface it with that. I lost this match. It was just a bad game for me. He managed to answer my board basically every single turn, and I just kept drawing all of my climaxes. It was so bad. I just was also a little out of it that match. He like anti-change countered me. And it was basically one of those situations where it's like, okay, now I know you have that in your deck, but I can't tell by the way you're carrying yourself currently if that's what you're going to be doing. So I kind of just have to walk into it.
Right.
Because it was like, I did some attacks that should be safer for it. And then I was like, all right, here's my last attack. Like, it's my level 3. I'm just going to do it. and kind of walk into on it, and then he anti-changed countered me. I was like, oh, that sucks, but also was kind of what I expected. But then I forgot to actually like hand encore because I don't know. I was just looking at all the climaxes in my hand, and I had like a uselet that I totally could have ditched for it. Do I think that was enough to change the outcome of the game? Not really. It certainly would have made it slightly more okay for me, but it just wasn't a game that I was going to win, I don't think.
Right. So it's just like it just went so badly that I was like, well, what
Yeah.
more can you do? Burn the tape.
Yeah. I was at one point, I'm pretty sure I had to field a 2-1 to attack with. Like,
Ugh.
yeah, like I was drawing absolute duds. It was kind of brutal. So he won. Like, again, he still played very well. I tried to play to my outs, but there's only so much you can do. So he won this match, and then he went on to get second in the tournament. So congratulations to him. Yeah. So then my very last match was against Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Again, he was playing Comeback Gate, very standard list. The only thing that I saw in his list that I was surprised about was he was playing the Stockwash event. I feel that most lists don't play that currently because it's like kind of hard to utilize because it's on an event that you don't really bond to or anything. So it's like I could just be playing something else in this slot, but he decided to play it, so it probably worked out well. I mean, like, in theory, it can work out well because you have that as well as a 2-1 that when it enters, you can pay 1 and they select 1 climax in their waiting room and shuffle everything back in.
Right.
So that's a very powerful combo. I think you could have totally justify playing the card. Obviously, he did. So it was a very interesting match. I was nervous going in because obviously either I get an invite to Worlds or I get nothing. So again, still happy with the result either way. Top 4 was my goal at the
But
very
there was
minimum.
still something on the line.
But it still mattered, yeah. Like, third, obviously going to be more preferential.
Mm-hmm.
So I was nervous going into the match, but looking at my opponent and also listening, I used my ears a little. He was very unhappy about how his previous game went. He had played against the Quince player that got first.
Right.
Congratulations to him, by the way. He was just on full tilt from his previous match. And lucky for me, they didn't really give him much time in between the matches because I had finished my match with the Ruby player much earlier than his match had finished. So they didn't really give him as much time in between the matches. So that's actually quite good for me. Seeing that my opponent's like mentally already off.
Right.
In terms of the game, not anything else.
No.
So that was a little relieving to see because, I mean, seeing so many times at locals, somebody will just be tilted from that just snowballs. I mean, if you don't have your head clear, you're going to just make mistakes. So I wasn't going to complain, really, that
exactly
my opponent was in that state. So something that I did in that match, so he took a lot of time making decisions, which is like fine. I'm not going to say anything because we weren't like running into time issues or anything. So it was still within the realm of like being reasonable. During his turns though, because there's not much for me to do, I was just staring directly at him. I could tell this made him a little uncomfortable because I was staring like straight at his eyes, and I don't think most people don't like that.
Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
Well, a lot of people who play card games are very introverted, so
right.
I kind of figured he's already on tilt. Let's just make him a little uncomfortable on top of it.
Right. So you're intentionally needling this poor guy.
A little, but I mean, it's the top cut. Like I'm not doing anything actually wrong. Maybe slightly unethical, but like even then, I'm just watching him. So if you want to say that's grimy, I don't know. I'll just look at the ceiling next time, I guess.
Just ask him about various historical events. Easy.
I think that would be a bad idea because there was 2 judges standing to my right, and also I believe an additional one to my left. So I would rather not do that. I'd rather actually just play the game. So yeah, that aside, the match was fine. We both did our game plans. Don Machi really just does its thing but also then answers whatever you were doing. So a typical turn is, they're going to play out something, and then me sitting here, I'm going to answer whatever they just did. And then on their turn, they're going to get back a full field and then answer whatever I just did. That's kind of just how the game goes.
It's Weiss Schwarz.
Yeah, it's Weiss Schwarz, but it's also, that's very much their goal, because their characters get very large, so they can answer things quite easily. Like they have an event that pumps 4,000 for whatever reason, and also salvages. And then their level 1 has potential to get giant. So like I said, it just kind of answers whatever you do, but also loses its board, so it's spending resources to do these answers, and it's just a cycle. But it does it well. So we both really just did what we were looking to do. I was sweating bullets because I kept drawing a lot of climaxes again. Somehow that happened again. I was dumping them out of my hand as quickly as I can. This list does have a lot of avenues to do so. Again, you're playing like a combination of 5 drop, search, and so you have those to at least go even on your hand to filter out into something more useful, as well as the level 1 Subarus that let you ditch top check 4 at a level 1 or higher. So again, you have like a total of 9 different ways in your deck to filter out, on top of some other things even.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't the worst, but it just kept happening, and I just kept drawing. Like even after refreshes, it's like, oh, here's more climaxes. Like this is pretty awesome.
I need these.
Yeah, I need these, just not in my hand. If they could stay in my deck, that would be a lot more preferable. So I was sitting with anywhere between 1 to 3 in my hand at almost every point of the game. Unfortunately for me, going into his level 3, that was the case. He was gearing up to go for the win that turn, for sure. He had a lot of stock, he had a lot of resources, he could have done whatever he wanted. If my memory serves correctly, I was sitting at a deck with 6 cards and 1 climax in it, but what I was presenting was much more than that, because he didn't know they were in my hand. Even though I was obviously very displeased every time I drew one, I just wasn't as vocal about it as some players would be.
Right.
So I didn't have a ton of tells that I was like as dire as I was sitting. Truthfully, I think if he didn't do what he proceeded to do, he actually would have just won the game flat out.
Oh, wow.
I don't think, because I was sitting at like 3-1. So if he forces a refresh and finds some amount of damage in between there, he had the game for sure. Because their combo is on play of climax, they assign a character to get an additional soul, but then on cancel of their damage, deal 2 damage.
Yeah.
And he only played 1 of those. I think if he found a way to play 2 of those and just swung, he honestly could have been fine. Like, I think that would have been his match. But luckily for me, he decided not to do that. I still really don't have an opinion on if what he did was the correct or incorrect play. Because again, I had information that he had no way of knowing, because to him it looks like I'm at least sitting on fine compression. So what he did was prepared himself for my turn, kind of just like assuming I wouldn't die, I guess. Because he spent a very long time, mind you, but all doing game actions, like very little sitting there humming and hawing. Like it was all game actions, to his credit. But he played like 3 of the Hestia knife. He just emptied his entire deck and forced a refresh on himself. So that was something. And then he played the 2-1, that when it comes in, you pay 1 and have the opponent select a climax and shuffle the rest of their waiting room back into their deck. Kind of funny, when he played that, I was like, oh, is that the 2-1 that just gets a lot of... It does this effect instead. And I'm sitting there like, looking at my hand and going, all right, sick deal for me. That gives me more of a shot, because I'm not going to take a mandatory 1 refresh point here. That's pretty sick deal for me. Still not favorable, my chances of canceling here, because again, I believe I was gripping 3, so maybe a triggered 1 as well. Like it was not looking good even then, but
you still put like 4 climaxes back in.
Between 3 to 4, yeah. I don't have perfect memory of how many it was, but mind you, the deck was pretty thick, because again, it wasn't going like the best. I wasn't having a bad game per se, but climax drawing aside, I mean.
Yeah.
So, deal. I'm not taking a refresh point. Absolutely will go for that. So yeah, he did that, and then what he proceeded to do was have some one soul character. I don't quite recall what it was. And then his Hestia level 3 Climax combo, and then the 2-1 that he had just fielded. He played the Climax combo for it. I think the third card was actually the CX Swapper, but doesn't matter. It wasn't a card that was mattering to the field. It was just a 1 soul. So he proceeded to assign the ability from Hestia to a 2-1. So now he had a total of a 2 soul on field, a 3 soul on field, and a 3 soul on field that had on cancel burn 2.
Yep.
So again, I think even if he just fielded that against me without shuffling back, like I'm pretty sure almost every combination of that's lethal.
Right.
Like I don't think I was living that very easily. But he didn't. So this is what he did. He swung for 3 with the Hestia. I believe that canceled. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. I think that stuck, actually, putting me to 3-4.
Yep.
I'm just reading my notes here. And then he swung for... I believe it stuck, and then he swung for 3 with the one that has on cancel burn 2.
Yep.
I canceled that attack. He may have crit these, but either way, these are his base swings. I canceled that one, and then took the 2. No. He must have canceled on the first one. Either way, just that one canceled, and maybe the 2 canceled as well. And then the last attack didn't kill me either. So either way, I just narrowly lived through this, and I went deal. I think he reversed my cards, or it reversed at least one of the Rushias I had out, so I just hand-on-cored it or whatever. Then we went to my turn, and I believe I just... Since he had correctly, or at least what he had decided to do was refresh himself, so he didn't have a big waiting room. He only had 3 targets in there that I could actually grab that wasn't a climax. So I was staring it down. I was staring down my combos on field, and I was staring down the climaxes in my hand. And I'm like, one of these game actions I make will win the game, and one of them will lose the game by overswinging. Because he, like, again, he had just refreshed himself, so he wasn't really out many climaxes, maybe 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
So he had either 3 open slots or 2 open slots. He had to have had 2. I think he did kill my middle lane. So again, if I play down the climax, I'm overswinging by a lot. And I'm only shuffling in 3. And I'm like, I don't think so. So I just turned cards sideways for vanilla swings, and it stuck, and I won.
You know what? It's the way Kidani intended.
Honestly, yes, I agree. It sparked joy. We turned cards sideways. They dealt their soul damage to the opponent and got them to level 4.
All right. So all in all, 3rd place.
Yeah.
So are you looking forward to Worlds in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I think it'll be a good time. I have no idea what I'll be playing. There's a few sets that come out in between that. There's also new cards for Hololive from the premium booster. I don't know yet what changes I want to make to the deck. There's a lot of good utility that can come in, but then it starts messing with my colors, which is kind of important for my deck because I think playing the Subaru that cares about having blue, yellow, and red in your level zone so that you can burn 2, I think it gives the deck a lot of reach that you otherwise don't have.
Right.
So I don't really know what kind of utility I'd want to change in. Got a lot of testing ahead of me. Otherwise, yeah, I'm looking forwards to Worlds. Should be fun. Sounds like they'll have side brackets as well for if you don't do well in the event. Also, it sounds like the venue is just open for walk-up, so you can like show up and just play side brackets and stuff. And free fight and whatever, if you're in the Los Angeles area. But yeah, it should be fun. I think I'll try and either go early or stay late so I can hang out with people.
Right. And you can go see the Hollywood sign.
I probably won't do that, actually.
Fair enough. It's pretty far.
It is, yeah. I have been to LA before.
Okay. All right. And finally, if you have one piece of advice to give to a player just starting Weiss Schwarz, what would it be?
Play the game. If you're just starting out, the only thing you should be worried about doing is just playing the game and having fun. you'll come to the decision for yourself if you care about being more competitive or not. I think you should just play the game and have fun with the people around you.
Awesome. That's all the big burning questions I and the Calgary Weiss Schwarz community have for you. Before we go, though, I'd like to see if you'd be down for a game of Rapid Fire. For those who don't listen to old hockey shows, Rapid Fire is a segment that Jay Onright and Dan O'Toole did for their Fox Sports show, Jay and Dan. They would ask a series of lighter or sillier questions in quick succession, most of them yes or no. When they went back to Canada Sports Network, TSN, they left the segment behind. My buddy decided to take it from them, and I'm stealing it from him. Are you down?
Absolutely. I've been waiting for you to ask.
Fantastic. Better meta, English or Japanese?
English right now. I think Japanese is not harboring a very fun tournament environment currently.
Fair enough. Best place for food after weeklies in your neck of the woods, Calgary, Alberta.
Calgary Court, but they closed too early now, so probably Hayden Block. Half-priced smoked meat cannot be beat.
Really can't. Best thing to do in Calgary that is not a tourist trap.
Play Weiss Schwarz.
Fair enough. Where could you get the best Reuben sandwich in Calgary, Alberta?
You know what? We're still deciding that, but right now, Side Street Bar and Grill in Kensington has my favorite sandwich because they actually serve it on the correct bread.
Do you have enough good boy points to get free tendies?
I don't know, Tim. Do I? I've been driving you pretty often.
That's fair. That's fair. Your buddy bets you $20 you can't win weeklies with a deck pre-2012. What set do you bring with you?
Pre-2012. I would borrow Zero no Sakaima.
Zero no Skyma. Perfect. And finally, does Kilua deserve all the flaming he gets?
No, he does so much for the community. He does not deserve it at all.
All right. That about wraps us up for today. Thank you again, Platplat, for coming on the show. I think we've recorded something awesome here. If you like what you heard in this interview, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Search Wild Weiss. You'll find our previous interviews with Carmen from Pittsburgh Weiss Schwarz, Calgary's own Kilua, Weiss Almanac creator Patty Wagon, former world champion Yu Peng, Ken Takahata, and Philip McKay, along with a bunch of other thoughtful Weiss discussion from the Calgary Weiss Schwarz community. If you want to check out our written work, head on over to wildwildweiss.wordpress.com. Watch our video stuff on YouTube. Search Wild Weiss. Catch us every Friday for some live action on twitch.tv/wildwildweiss. Follow us on Twitter @wildwildweiss, or check out the Calgary Weiss Schwarz community on Facebook or Discord. Do you have anything you want to plug before you sign off, or anyone you want to thank for your tournament victories?
I would like to thank everyone from the Calgary community. In the past 7 years of play, y'all have been very welcoming, and I really love playing with you guys. I'd like to thank you specifically for hosting a prep night the night before flying out. I think we got some good games in. I'd like to thank Kevin for looking at my deck list that I sent him, going, wow, you're going to RNG Quince and Mushoku with the Shion, and then giving no further feedback. That's exactly what I needed to hear, because that meant, oh, I'm not like absolutely stupid and didn't send 50 bad cards in. Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone again. It's been great. As far as plugs, I'm going to say it so that I have to do it. I plan on writing an article on the tourney prep and also giving a little bit more of a further, deeper look into why I made some of the card choices I was playing, as well as a light description of the meta that you can expect going forward.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. So, until next time, this has been Igor Squatslov.
And this has been Platplat.
And I hope to see y'all next time.